You did a good job getting here on time.
Yep. Thank you.
It's live. Hi. Arn got here on time. Say something, Arn.
Something, Aaron. Good night, Gracie.
To the future of our family. I will build a city that people can dream about. Megalopolis. That man is a megalomaniac.
Looks like we've got some commercials here, so I'm gonna mute that until.
Have to prove yourself.
Okay, looks like they're queuing up the debate here, so let's unmute that.
Okay.
Can you turn the volume on the debate up?
Joining you live from Philadelphia and across the globe with our powerhouse team coverage as Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are set to face off for the first time in a presidential debate in less than 59 minutes.
And I'm Jonathan Call. When Kamala Harris and Donald Trump walk on that debate stage in less than an hour, it will be the very first time they have been face to face, the first time the two have ever met. And the circumstances of tonight's meeting, beyond extraordinary. Kamala Harris is now the Democratic nominee without competing in a single primary. Donald Trump, the Republican nominee, stands indicted for his efforts to overturn the last election and has suggested he won't accept the results of this one if he doesn't win. Joining us at the anchor desk, Chief White House Correspondent Mary Bruce, Senior Congressional Correspondent Rachel Scott. Both have been out on the campaign trail, crisscrossing the country with the candidates, gearing up for what could be the most consequential moment of this incredibly consequential campaign. Just moments ago, Donald Trump's motorcade arrived here at the National Constitution Center. There you see it. Donald Trump's plane touching down in Philadelphia less than 2 hours ago. Kamala Harris arriving yesterday after spending days hunkered down in debate prep.
They're getting out of a
Pittsburgh.
plane.
Both campaigns have been here over the past
Hooray.
2 hours to get a firsthand look at that debate stage. And Mary, Kamala Harris has been preparing for this for weeks.
Intensely preparing. She even went so far as to set up a mock debate stage, that stage there that she is about to walk out on, full with TV lights, doing these mock rehearsals. And she's also been turning to Hillary Clinton. I'm told that they have spoken in the last week. She turned to a lot of Clinton's advisors, those who prepped her for her face-offs with Trump, even one who embodied the role of Donald Trump in those rehearsals, even dressing like the former president. Her goal here tonight on that stage is to really reintroduce herself to voters, remind them of her proposals and her policies, and then to pivot and go on the attack. She wants to remind voters of what Donald Trump stands for, what his administration might look like a second go-round. And yes, she is also going to try and get under his skin, to needle him a bit. The challenge for her will be to bait him without getting baited herself.
Both candidates have been here looking at that debate stage, but I have to say, Rachel, Trump seemed to spend a lot of time looking at all the angles, the camera angles. He has been preparing as well.
Yeah, this is a former president who is keenly aware of image. And despite his advisors insisting he doesn't need any debate prep, the former
So he is keenly aware of the camera angles and looking at the camera angles. That's some great debate prep there. Let me tell you. I heard that Harris was doing mock debates with some of her trusted advisors. That's how you prepare. Not like, how do I look? Does it show my comb over? Do I look too orange? Etc. So I'll turn back on the commentary. Here we go.
Take a look. When these two candidates enter this debate hall, it will be their very first time coming face to face, and they'll be standing just 6 feet apart. No live studio audience to cheer them on, no campaign staff allowed in this room either. Donald Trump won the coin toss and decided to give the final word in this debate. Vice President Kamala Harris choosing the podium on the right side of the debate stage. The candidates' microphones will only be turned on when it is their turn to speak. They will have 2 minutes to answer each question, 2 minutes for a rebuttal, and just 60 seconds for any follow-up questions, which means they'll be paying close attention to this clock right here. The colors will change as the time winds down, turning yellow when there's just 15 seconds left and red when their time is up. And of course, sitting right here will be our very own David Muir and Lindsay Davis, who will be moderating the first and likely only debate before the November election. All right, so look, it is one thing to obviously meet your rival, but it's another thing to meet.
Arn's fixing his camera angles right now in preparation for the debate like Trump. Hooray! Okay, back to the chatter.
Only closing remarks. Each candidate's microphone will only be turned on when it is their turn to speak. Otherwise, they will be muted. Former President Donald Trump won that coin toss and chose to deliver the last closing statement. Of course, not unusual for them to want to coordinate all of these details.
And Martha,
It's the details, indeed.
the details, and you've been at events, you've moderated general election debates. You, in fact, moderated that last amazing debate between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton.
The microphones were not muted, I can tell you that right now. You know, I always tell people the first debate I did in 2012, Joe Biden, Paul Ryan, I said it was like studying for college exams and then taking them in front of 70 million people. The debate with Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump was like studying for college exams and then taking it in front of a firing squad. He would attack the moderator. You know, he would say, I was unfair. He would say, you're giving her more time. You really had to concentrate on keeping them both on.
How about now?
Yeah, I'm hearing myself now as well.
Do you have it open in another screen? The YouTube. You need to just have it coming through one feed. Your sound.
Well, I have it the way you set it up.
I know I might have messed it up, so you got to check. Back to the commentary.
In office, he has actually suggested military tribunals for his enemies should he get back in power. This is a very different kind of election.
It is a very different kind of election. And just what you said, John.
I am getting double.
Military tribunals. I mean, there are military officers out there who served under Trump before who are worried they're going to get pulled back in court-martial. Looking at his political opponents.
Former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
His own chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who he basically accused of treason. People like that. It is a different election, and people want to hear about what kind of president he would be again if he wins, and of course, what kind of commander-in-chief Kamala Harris
But Mary, what I'm wondering is, will Kamala Harris make that a central part of her case? Will she prosecute that case against Trump, or will she stick to the issues?
Well, look, she certainly has made clear out on the trail that she is not shying away from prosecuting the case against Trump. It's a central part of her biography as she reintroduces herself to voters here. But really, her focus tonight is on seizing this moment, likely the largest audience she has so far, to make her case and make clear the split screen with Trump.
And Rachel, January 6th, which we'll probably hear something about here. January 6th is actually something that Donald Trump doesn't want to run away from. He once told me it was one of the proudest moments of his presidency.
Where
and I think a lot of Republicans
where the video's playing, move the video down so that they can see the screen. The video screen.
The former president has called those who stormed the Capitol rioters. He has vowed to pardon them.
Patriots.
And I called them patriots, excuse me.
There you go.
I had an opportunity to ask the former president about that recently. Take a look.
Okay.
My question is on those rioters who assaulted officers.
You have to
would you pardon
what's
those
going to
people?
happen? Oh, absolutely, I would.
You would pardon those?
If they're innocent, I would pardon them.
They've been convicted.
And by the way, the Supreme Court just they were convicted by a very a very tough system.
Yeah, so to be clear there, the former president calls them patriots. He stands by his pledge to pardon those rioters, even those who have been convicted of assaulting police officers that day.
And look, for all that and all that we've discussed and all the chaos of the last several weeks in this campaign, this is essentially a tied race. Terry
Is everybody
Moran,
able to
our
hear when
national,
if I were
senior
to
national
do
correspondent.
this?
No, don't hear the video.
Nope. Okay.
History of polling. Take a look at the polling averages. The 538 national polling average right there has Harris up by about 3 points. Look, that's within the margin of error, but her momentum from the last 3 weeks is basically stalling. The latest national poll underscores this very simple truth. It is close. The battleground states. Take a look at this.
All right. How about now?
Nope, don't hear it.
Nope, it's off too.
Keep in mind tonight, nearly
Okay.
Now
a
I can hear it.
third of likely voters in these polls, they're telling pollsters that
Okay.
they believe they need to know more about Kamala Harris. Look at that. Donald Trump is one of the most famous men in the world, one of the most famous people in the world. People know what they think about Donald Trump. Kamala Harris, there's 30%, almost 28% in that poll, who don't know enough. That's an opportunity for her, also a challenge. John, Martha?
No doubt. People know who Donald Trump is. Martha?
Okay, coming up, the opponents have been on the attack. Tonight, the candidates will now be confronted with the biggest issues online: the economy, immigration, abortion.
Arn,
Crime, foreign policy, and more when we come back.
It was a regular day for 19 non.
I'm going to turn the ads off. So we need to fill in some quiet time here, Arn. Thank you to LPMD. They said, thank you for consistently standing up for the LGBT community. Arn is still figuring out his setup. What are you doing, Arn? He's looking at something. He was in Austin testifying before the State Board of Education. They're trying to insert into the elementary school curriculum things that promote Christianity above other religions. You know we're live, right?
Yeah.
So, like, when you do this,
You're streaming.
Fuck. So they're telling me there's no sound again.
Say something, Aaron.
Something, Aaron. Something. Good night, Gracie.
For the future of our family. We'll build a city that people can dream about. Megalopolis. That man is a megalomaniac. year of the Biden administration. But for the past 2 years, we've seen significant decreases, sometimes double-digit decreases in violent crime. Murder so far this year is down 17% in the nation's biggest cities. But no one's jumping for joy because gun violence is a chronic epidemic in this nation. And they're always flashing symbols that are painful reminders. And in just the past 7 days alone, we had a 14-year-old boy walk into a Georgia high school and allegedly kill 2 classmates and 2 teachers using an assault rifle. As we speak, there's a desperate manhunt in Kentucky to find the sniper who was shooting at people driving along a busy highway. These are all impacts on the way people actually feel, John.
Yeah, whatever the global stats are, people are concerned about crime. Martha?
And of course, another key issue, abortion, Mary. And Kamala Harris looks at this as a very strong issue for the Democrats.
She has been out in front on this issue and hammering Donald Trump on this, blaming him, pointing the finger squarely at him, saying he is to blame for the tough new abortion restrictions sweeping the country. We have seen over and over again that she notes that he has bragged about appointing the Supreme Court justices who overturned Roe. She knows that polling shows this is a winning issue for her. And of course, that every time that abortion access has been on the ballot since Roe was overturned, reproductive rights have won. They see this as an issue that they hope will drive voters to the polls in November, especially as Donald Trump has been really struggling to define his position.
And he really has struggled to define that position. He takes credit for helping to overturn Roe v. Wade, but otherwise not very specific.
He has been all over the map on this issue, but when you look at his record and what he has done, he appointed 3 of the 5 Supreme Court justices that overturned Roe versus Wade. That cleared the way for 22 states to either ban or severely restrict access to abortion. But Trump has also said, even though he believes this should be a states issue, he believes some states have gone too far. He thinks the 6-week abortion ban in Florida, for instance, his home state, has gone too far. He didn't like that abortion ban that almost went into effect in Arizona. This is important for 2 reasons. As Mary mentioned, it's going to be on the ballot in a number of states, including several battleground states. And this issue has won every single time, even in conservative states. Second reason why this is important, Donald Trump is losing ground when it comes to likely female voters against Vice President Kamala Harris.
And a very, very important demographic. Coming up, both candidates hoping to make their case to voters in this critical debate, now less than 38 minutes away.
We finally got the sound set up. Good. Hopefully. Everybody ready for a show?
Hey, good morning, America. America thrives. So come in now for a chance to win.
I'm so looking forward to this. Trump is so easily confused, and he's never pressured. This is just going to be great. When you ask him the slightest simple question, everything he says is stupid. When imagine just giving this guy only 2 minutes to answer a question, like what policy will you enact to solve this problem? And then you get to hear about the numbers that are unlike any numbers anybody's ever seen, but they'll get used to it. The fuck does that mean? All right, now I'm not hearing anything anyway. You guys still have sound on that end?
You're not hearing anything because it's the commercials and I muted so you can talk.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I didn't know that. All right, yeah, so every time Trump talks, he always gets like softball questions, and even if he gets a pressing question, it's from a newspaper reporter or whatever, and they'll give him like 3 to 5 minutes to rant when he's talking like a child who hasn't read the book he's giving a report on. That's the way he answers everything. So this is going to be good. It's going to be really good to see how she grills him, how any of the pertinent questions that they hit him with, he's going to try to come up with 2 minutes of meandering, nonsensical bullshit. Just like he always does. This is going to be fun to say. Oh, there's no sound? I'm getting a report there's no sound again.
They can hear you.
Okay, good. They can hear me. Good. All right, so the commercials are muted. They can hear me fine.
Yes.
All right, then it's all good. All right. Cat, get off my table. All right. I'm so stoked. This is going to be good.
I'm excited about it too.
Yeah. And we only saw we saw Trump doing that debate with Hillary, and look what a mess he was with her, right? Like walking up behind her and standing behind her while she's speaking, and then interrupting to say, "Wrong. That makes me smart." Yeah, he said that when she accused him of not paying his taxes. You remember that?
Yep.
Yeah, this is going to be really choice.
I heard that the Harris campaign wanted them to mute to change the rule where they were muting the microphones when somebody else was speaking. Okay, no, this isn't it yet. But the Trump campaign didn't agree, so some people think that works in Trump's favor because he can't talk the whole time like he did in that debate with Hillary and interrupt, and he distracted Biden in not the last debate but the one he did before in 2020. Yep. So, well, let's see how it works out. I mean, for me, the less listening to Trump, the better. So
that was the advice that Rudy Giuliani gave him. Interrupt Biden as much as possible. You don't have to know what you're saying. Just be antagonistic and interrupt constantly.
Yeah. And I get where you're going that because it throws Biden off his game, maybe because he seems to have some trouble concentrating sometimes.
We're back on, I think. The debate hasn't started yet, but we got talking heads.
Okay. I'll put the volume back on. Just a sec.
Get the Latino vote because it's so important, including in the battleground states. As of now, Kamala Harris is doing better than President Trump with Latino voters. There are still 10 to 15% of Latinos that are considered persuadable, so they still can be convinced by either one. But there's about 30%. Between 25 and 30% of Latinos that have traditionally voted Republican, they continue to do so no matter who the candidate is. President Trump did improve those numbers in the last two elections, but Kamala Harris has also improved her numbers tremendously from Biden from when before he dropped out of the race, but she still has not reached the amount of support that he had in 2020. So there's an opportunity for both Biden and for both Trump and Harris to capture the Latino vote.
Yeah, Harris is doing a lot better than President Biden was with this very key demographic. We were just talking about immigration, Maria. What about the views on immigration when it comes to these voters?
Well, for Latino voters, their views on immigration have shifted than they were in the last few elections. Now they support a more stricter laws, a more hardline approach toward immigration. And that is because usually the Democrats promised immigration reform and Latinos were attracted to that promise, but that promise never materialized. Now they feel that the recent arrivals hurts not only their image, but they feel that it is unfair that they are getting paroled. Many of them are getting work permits while there are still millions of undocumented people here living in this country that are either married to U.S. citizens or have children that are U.S. born that have been waiting for decades, also the dreamers. And that's the one thing that I think that they need to take into consideration. One thing that might hurt President Trump is the mass deportations. Latinos are not in favor of mass deportations. Rachel?
Maria Elena Salinas, we so appreciate your time and your insights. Thank you so much for joining us. John?
All right, we are less than 30 minutes away from the first debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. When we come back, the global stakes in this most extraordinary moment.
That's funny. I was racing home from Austin so that I could get here on time, and I arrive 1 hour before they begin.
Well, now you have 30 minutes, so you can talk about what Aaron Ra thinks about the debate, right? Before the debate starts. And you can eat your sandwich. Or what are you eating, beef jerky?
Oh, yeah, I went to Buc-ee's and got some dried beefsteak. Get off my table.
And you can discipline the cat.
Yes, fucking cat. Who always runs over my keyboard, and she only hits like 2 or 3 keys, and then she's reprogrammed everything. It's kind of amazing. So yeah, I spent the day in Austin giving testimony to the Texas State Board of Education amongst 100 other people also giving testimony, and the vast majority of them were, of course, against what Texas is trying to do. Texas is actually trying to teach full-on creationism and right with the global flood and to first grade students, so that first graders have to take a test on what order God created things in. And they say that's okay and it's legal to do it. It's not a violation of church-state separation because they're presenting it in an objective way. And what they mean by objective is telling 6-year-olds this is what happened.
Someone was asking, is your testimony in Austin going to be put on the YouTube channel?
It will. A whole bunch of them will be, but it's going to take me days to edit all that together.
What are you excited to see in the debate before it starts? What are you looking for?
Trump can't name a policy. All he does is he bluffs, he blowhards. I don't know what he obfuscates. He's never been able to explain a policy or how anything would work. It's always bullshit language. Kamala can explain a policy and how it would work. You know, Biden, if he had a chance, could probably do that too. But Trump is incapable. He's never had a plan. He said he always answers every question with, we'll have one and it'll be a great plan. It'll be the best plan ever. But then we never see it.
There has been some criticism from right-wingers that Kamala doesn't have a policy. And some people who are also interested in voting with her want to learn more about her policies. So I'm hoping that she gets her policy platform out there so that people can be more excited about voting for them, and people can, because I think they were saying the honeymoon period with Kamala after the DNC convention is over, so we got to have some substance here.
Yep.
To keep momentum rolling.
But I think she's going to provide that. And the only thing that Trump is going to be able to provide, and we're going to see this in this debate, is when he says, this is where they should have hammered him earlier, when he was on some kind of cross-examination where he mentioned his tariffs plan. And what they really should have done is asked him what a tariff is. Because at the time that he promoted it, he thought that if he charges tariffs on all Chinese imports, that China would have to pay those. He didn't understand that American consumers have to pay those. I think we're back. Are we right back? No, that's another commercial. Yeah, so I mean, Trump really has absolutely no idea what's going on. Remember, the man has bankrupted every business he's ever run. And he's in debt to foreign banks to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. Now we're back.
I think it's starting again, so I'm going to turn the volume on.
Decisions the next president makes will have a profound effect on America's role in the world, from Ukraine to Russia and, of course, Israel. So let's start there with our Matt Gutman, who has spent months covering the conflict in the Middle East. And Matt, I know this debate is being watched very closely there.
Very closely, Martha, and a former longtime advisor for Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu told me that he's going to be watching very closely for what former President Trump has to say about Iran. He said for Netanyahu, both Harris and Trump are known quantities, but the advisor telling me that for Netanyahu, a Trump presidency would be a dream come true, especially because of the mounting scrutiny that Netanyahu has been under, increasing allegations that he's been dragging his feet on this hostage deal and ceasefire, mounting even further after the release of that video showing the tunnel in which those 6 hostages were executed, including American Hirsch Goldberg Pollen, not just a couple of hours ago. And if you ask Israelis and Palestinians what they're looking for from Vice President Harris, they're likely to say they want to know what she has to offer that is different from what the Biden administration has been doing the past several months. Despite massive efforts, they've promised that a deal is around the corner, but it remains elusive. And it's going to be a lot easier of a sell for the former president, who's never faced a crisis like this, but he's likely going to say and repeat what he said in the past, that if he were president, October 7th would never have happened. If he were president, he would have been able to have strong-armed Hamas and Netanyahu into a ceasefire and hostage deal that would have saved the lives of many Palestinians and, of course, those hostages, Martha.
A lot of challenges about that tonight for sure, Matt. Thanks so much.
That sounded really twisted to me because what does it matter to any of us what Netanyahu wants for the United States of America's president?
Yeah.
Like, and also maybe Trump would have gotten them to ceasefire. That's some bullshit right there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because you know that Trump with all of the right wingers, they are full in on the Zionism, right?
Mm-hmm.
We realize that this is a sensitive issue and that there are problems on both sides, and so that there's going to have to be some awareness there. But the right wingers are just going to full Zion and eradication of Palestine. That's where they're coming from.
You're telling me that the people that sometimes say these homey little things like we ought to nuke it into a glass bowl. These people would be pushing for a ceasefire, or would they be pushing for them to wipe Palestine off the map?
Yeah, I'm going to suggest they're going to go for the latter. Is that screen frozen, dear?
I just wanted to say that I just wanted to interject there that their commentary on that was like, what? Why do we care what Netanyahu wants? We're the ones voting. It's our freaking country.
Yeah, I don't think we should stop this. Let's reset it, or let's get it back on.
I mean, I spoke to an advisor to the president's office today, and he used one simple word: critical. It's critical what happens tonight. It's critical what happens in November, not just to Ukraine, but I think this sends strong signals to other critical areas in terms of foreign policy for the United States, for example, China. And this war is just grinding on. I mean, overnight, Ukraine launching one of its biggest drone attacks on Russia since the start of this war. 20 drones were shot down the Moscow region, over 140 fired into Russia. An apartment block hit, a woman killed, and one of Moscow's airports was also struck. What we've seen is Ukraine repeatedly trying to target Russia in an attempt to try and bring the war home to the Kremlin and to the Russian people. And this is partly because they've been given restrictions on the weapons that have been supplied by the United States and others. And what Ukraine is hoping is that those restrictions are going to be lifted. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is going to come here to Kyiv this week. Speaking in London, he confirmed that Iran has now transferred ballistic missiles to Russia. He's expecting that those are going to be used in the coming weeks. He describes this also as a critical moment for Ukraine. So all eyes are going to be on tonight's presidential debate. Even apparently President Zelensky expected to tune in. And the outcome, I think, of this presidential debate is going to be critical to the outcome of Ukraine's defense against Russia's invasion. Martha?
Okay. Yep. Thanks so much, Ian. And Ian and I have both spent a great deal of time in Afghanistan, John, as you know, and that will be a key issue tonight. Former President Trump has been slamming the Biden-Harris administration for that disastrous withdrawal, the way it was done in Afghanistan.
Hey, look, let's say it bluntly. It was a dark moment for the Biden campaign, for the Biden presidency. It might be the darkest moment of his presidency. In fact, the Republicans have now given the Congressional Medal of Honor, not the Medal of Honor. They announced
Medal of Freedom, Congressional Medal of Freedom. Yes.
To the 13 service members who died at Abbey Gate in Afghanistan. And one thing, if you look at that moment, so that withdrawal from Afghanistan happened in August of 2021. The other thing that happened in August of 2021 was that Joe Biden became an unpopular president. His popularity, his favorability ratings went below 50%. They never came back.
But Joe Biden was also at the time saying this would not be like Saigon. We all saw those images of that. It's hard to play that down. If you're the president, it's hard to call that a success. And Mary, let's go back to Israel and Gaza, a key issue also for Kamala Harris, and a very, very fine line she has to walk.
A very fine line. And this is one of those rare issues where she is taking a notably different tone from the president. She has been much more forceful in speaking out about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, stressing, yes, of course, Israel has a right to defend itself, but saying Palestinians also have the right to dignity, security, and freedom. Now, policy-wise, she is largely vowing to continue the policies of the Biden administration, but there is no question on this issue, she is facing the most pressure from Democratic voters. I've been at nearly every Harris rally so far, and at almost every one, she is interrupted by protesters eager to make their voices heard on that. They will be listening closely.
Very strong voting bloc there too, Rachel.
Yeah, they're going to be listening to that message. All right, so coming up, Senator Tom Cotton and Governor Josh Shapiro are standing by with just about 20 minutes until the debate. Stay with us.
Yes, stay with us. As we start a show an hour before anything happens. So, Greg, I just saw in the chat that Greg Locke's house was shot at.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I never advocate for violence.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not even of prisoners and that. So,
Remind us who Greg Locke is for people who don't know.
Greg Locke is a fundamentalist preacher who says outrageous things and calls his own congregation witches. Tries to call out. He literally does witch hunts of his own congregation to get everybody to kind of turn on each other to identify who the witch is. He's just an extreme personality that also gives false prophecy, and then makes up a bunch of bullshit excuses for the false prophecies that he made, why they didn't come true. Well, of course they did. They happened spiritually.
Uh-oh, you're cutting out, Arn.
Yeah, I'm cutting out.
I don't hear you, Arn.
I don't know why.
Arn's talking, but don't hear him.
Okay.
Someone reminded me while he's trying to figure out if he put the mute button on or what he did.
No,
but
I didn't do anything.
From what I see, the mute button isn't on. He was talking and then... Can you hear me?
Yep.
But can't hear Aaron.
Yep, they hear me.
Oh, okay, thank you. Sorry for interrupting you. Go ahead, sweetheart.
Yep. Yeah, I don't remember what I was saying. Were we still talking about Greg Locke? I can't remember now. So let's hear from you, dear. Honey, can you hear me? Did you lose me again? Can you hear me? All right. Maybe the problem, maybe she's muting me. No, that's not what's happening. Yep, she is muted. I'm not muted. She's muted, and the video's muted. So I don't ask me why she. What happened? Yep, we lost Lalandra. I'm gonna have to go get her. Be back with you in. Oh no, there she is.
Awesome. Can you hear me?
Yes. We also lost the show when you did that.
Okay. I'm gonna put it back on.
Okay.
Hold on a second. It's sometimes my headphones blank out, so I'm gonna just go with no headphones.
No, I had to do the same. My headphones weren't doing the game either.
Yeah, so I'm gonna put that screen back on for y'all. Yeah. Can you hear it?
Nope.
Let me make sure that it's not muted. It's not muted.
It's also not playing.
Oh, maybe that's what it is.
Yeah,
There it
don't stop it from playing. Just mute it.
Today, tensions in the Middle East.
Okay, it is playing, but I can't.
And I can hear it now.
Okay, you can hear it. Awesome.
With some fun in between. Catching up on sleep during the weekend could be good for your heart.
Non-alcoholic bars are popping up in a growing number of cities. That's the spirit.
America This Morning
America's #1 early morning news.
on ABC News Live.
More Americans choose ABC News, America's #1 news source.
And there you see the debate stage here in Philadelphia. The debate now less than.
Oh my gosh, look at that, an empty debate
We are
stage.
joined on behalf of the Trump campaign by Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton. Senator Cotton, thanks a lot for being. We only have a couple minutes. This debate's about to get underway, but I wanted to ask you, Trump, do you think
So they're going to give Trump one of those
is it going to be the
Klingon
Donald Trump
weapons,
that is going to be making
and
personal
Kamala only
attacks,
gets a
insulting
Ningosh
Kamala
and a
Harris, or is it
katana.
going to be the Donald Trump that's going to focus on his issues?
John, I think you're going to see that Donald Trump, who's president for 4 years, who has a clear record.
People
This
saying
campaign
that
is
because
unusual.
of the
We don't have a
pausing, we're
candidate
10%
running
off.
for
You have
office
to, you have
for the
to
first
refresh
time.
the video.
The American
Catch it
people
back up.
remember what it was like under
Gotcha.
President Trump.
Okay.
We had
Yeah,
stable
that's why we
prices,
don't
rising
stop it
wages,
anymore.
a secure border.
Okay.
Off of their record, but making clear to voters who are concerned that she won't just be Biden 2.0.
How about now?
Well, serving
Yeah, I
as
can
Joe
hear it fine.
Biden's vice
Okay,
president
awesome.
made her
Okay,
fit
good.
and ready to serve on day one. I think it's important that we examine Kamala Harris's positions, her vision, the things she wants to do for this nation. Elections are about the future, and Kamala Harris's vision for the future is a stark contrast to the dangerous vision of the future that Donald Trump has, one of less freedom and more chaos under Donald Trump.
Somebody
We will see
suggested
how
we
it
take a
unfolds on
drink
the
every
debate
time
stage.
Trump
Governor Shapiro,
insults
thank you so
Kamala.
much.
All right, so we've
Yeah,
talked to
we're
surrogates
gonna
from both
be
campaigns. Coming up, we are going to talk to somebody who has both
really
debated
drunk
Donald
then.
Trump and helped him prepare for big debates. With tonight's showdown less than 14 minutes
I'm
away.
glad we got all this worked out before it started.
Yeah, it's probably a good thing that they gave us an hour to figure out all that. They sure play a lot of commercials in this damn
is
thing.
Impact by Nightline.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
I should get a beer
My
Yes,
sense
you
was
should.
that
Matter of fact,
everybody-
Oh,
well,
they're
you do that.
while they're having the commercials, and you
having a secret
talk to
abortion
them
that not even
Okay,
about
I will
family
sit there
knew about.
and talk to them. Yes.
while the commercials are on.
What is
Yes.
the relationship like between
Ah,
Harry and William?
So yeah,
today?
I've been wanting to
You
see
look great.
Trump
Are you on Ozempic?
stressed or pressured because
not gonna yell at you
I've only
breakfast
seen it a
until
couple
you
of
get your
times, and
chores
then
done.
whenever it
She talks
happens, he
about tough
collapses
love
immediately.
and harsh
Remember when he was on
punishment.
that
No, it's abuse.
that panel
I
of
think
3
Scott
black women,
Peterson
and he
murdered
started
his wife
talking about how
and his
Kamala
child.
was
Proved me
originally
wrong.
Indian until she
Do you
became
feel
black,
the church accepted
and he just
abuse?
kept saying
Yep,
and
that's him.
doing
Yep.
stupid
Ready?
shit
Does your
that he
church
doesn't even
protect
realize he's
sexual
doing
predators?
stupid shit.
You top the most
It's kind of
raw
impressive.
season yet.
Fabulous.
So I'm thinking he does especially badly when he's talking to women,
The all-new
regardless.
season premieres this
So,
September. Only
This is
on
going to be
Hulu.
great.
Whenever,
He's going to be
wherever news
especially out of
breaks,
his element
it's
for
so
this.
important to always remember that lives are changed here in London, in Buffalo,
I'm
Yeah,
Texas,
I'm seeing a
Edinburgh,
comment about
Scotland.
Trump
Reporting
shooting
from
a
Rolling
commercial
Fork,
at the Arlington
Mississippi, Ukrainian
Cemetery.
refugees here
Remember
in
that Donald
Warsaw,
Trump,
turning to a
when he was
small
at that
community
cemetery, he
outside
told one of
of
his aides,
Mexico
he
City.
asked the
Getting
question,
you
he's pointing
behind
all
the
these
stories
people who
as they
gave their
happen.
lives to their country,
ABC
and
News
says,
Live.
I don't get it.
We'll take you
What's
there.
in it for them?
Stream ABC News live weeknights wherever you
These are the
stream
same
your
people he
news.
called
Only on ABC
suckers
News
and
Live.
losers
First
because
thing in
they
the morning.
died.
There's a lot going on.
We're still
Because he
in a
has
flash flood morning to
absolutely
catch
no
you up with
concept of what it
happened
means
overnight. Clashing
to
over
give your
national
life for something
security.
bigger
What's
than you.
happening
How could
today?
how could
Tensions
Trump
in the Middle
imagine
East.
What
anything
people
being
are
bigger or
talking
more
about,
important
the
than he
worries on
is?
Wall Street.
Fast, straightforward.
With some fun in between. Catching up
Yeah.
on sleep during the
That's so
weekend
nice.
could be good
Somebody
for your
said they
heart.
can't think of a
Non-alcoholic
better
bars are
place
popping
to
up in a
watch
growing
the
number of
debate than
cities.
with
That's
Arn
the
and
spirit.
Melinda.
America
That
This
is very
Morning
sweet.
America's
Thank you so
#1
much.
early morning news.
on ABC News Live.
Did
When
you get
were
your beer,
coming of
dear?
age in the 1980s,
Yes, I
the
did.
Brat Pack was near the center of
Dark
You
beer.
should. I should have
cultural
gone to the
awareness.
store
But
first because
for
we're
those
down
of
to
us
yellow beer.
experiencing it from the inside, the Brat Pack was something very different.
Is
The
this
only
a-
black beer I've got now is so potent that I'll be a mess before the debate starts.
What a disaster.
Why did we take it as an offense?
I'm not going to say we were Beatles or anything.
Well, we didn't tell Shea Stadium.
So I'm probably going to go grab a refill on this once we get back to the talking heads.
They
Betrayal is one of
If
the
I'm
hardest types
muting
of
it,
trauma to overcome.
why would that pause the video?
Shining armor.
Because you
Everything
didn't
felt
hit the
right.
mute button, you hit the pause button.
I found this hidden folder.
So if I do this, can you hear it?
No, I mean, it's still playing, but I don't hear it. And
Okay.
that's what's supposed to happen. That's correct.
Okay.
All right. I wonder how many people we've got in the chat right now. I wish I could see that. I'm afraid to open another window to see what this looks like on YouTube because I don't want to fuck it up and cause more double sound.
Yeah. 600.
600.
Yep, and 691, 602. And also Lawrence is here, I see in the comments.
Outstanding. Yeah, Lawrence has a great video out. Unfortunately, it's an hour and a half long, and I haven't been able to find a complete hour and a half to listen to it yet. My plan was that I would listen to it this morning when I drove to Austin and listen to it again on the way back. But I'm in a Jeep with 37-inch mud tires, and I can't hear anything in there. So I couldn't even listen to his video there. All right, I think we're back, dear.
Joining us, I'm Martha Raddatz. We're live from Philadelphia
He's
at
back.
the National Constitution Center, the site of tonight's debate, now about 10 minutes away.
And I'm Jonathan Carl here with Mary Bruce and Rachel Scott. The candidates are just off the stage, ready to walk out. They are in their hold rooms, just minutes from making that walk. Martha, you have been backstage at this moment. What's it like?
Well, it's stressful, but it's also that time you just say, this is go time. You get in your zone. I'm sure the nominees, the candidates right now are thinking the same thing. They've studied. They're going to go out, open the curtain.
All right, well, then let's bring somebody in who has been there both debating Donald Trump and helping him prepare for general election debates, the former governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie. So Chris, you've helped prepare Trump for this moment several times. He says he doesn't prepare, but he actually does. Bring us into that room right now. What's going on with Donald Trump?
Well, look, at this point, he's in the worst hour of his prep because you just have to sit there and wait for the time to come. And they make you get there early. And so he is there. He's not really being spoken to. You know, a little small talk here and there, but nobody's trying to give him any kind of clues.
So let me ask you the question. Let me ask you the question I tried to ask Tom Cotton. He didn't exactly give me an answer.
The way that Trump prepares is by not getting any
clues. Which Trump is going to
clues.
show up tonight? You know what I mean by that. Which Trump?
I think at the beginning of the debate, the Trump who will show up will be the calmer Donald Trump. He knows inherently after the 2020 first debate against Joe Biden that the other Donald Trump is not the one that's a winning formula. The question's going to be, will he be able to continue to maintain that approach through questioning by David and Lindsey and through any comments that Vice President Harris makes in his direction? And that'll be the key to how he performs tonight.
And you and I were talking, you helped prepare him for those 2016 debates against Hillary Clinton. He told you that he had respect for Hillary Clinton, that Hillary Clinton was smart as you were preparing. What about Kamala Harris? We hear not the same.
Well, certainly he's not saying that publicly in any way. And I can tell you that in 2016, he would regularly say during the many debate prep sessions that we had with him that Hillary Clinton was smart, that she was a good debater, that she was not to be taken lightly. And I don't think there was ever a moment in 2016 where he took her lightly. I do think he took Joe Biden lightly in 2020. And clearly during the prep sessions that I had with him, it was very, very difficult to get him to focus on what Joe Biden might or might not do in that first debate. And I think his performance in part reflected that. So the question's going to be, is what he's saying publicly what he really believes? We know that often with Donald Trump, that's performance. But I will tell you that in his 2016 prep, he was serious about getting ready for Hillary Clinton. In his 2020 debate prep, he was completely unserious about getting ready for Joe Biden. I think performances in both those debates reflected that approach.
All right, Chris Christie, you'll be watching with us. Martha?
And we have about 6 minutes left before the debate. So let's bring in Donna Brazil, formerly the DNC, and Reince Priebus, the RNC. Welcome to both of you. And Donna, let's start with you. You have said that Kamala Harris has to own the future. but she also has to own the past. So how does she do this?
It's quite easy. Because I do believe that in talking about the future, you draw from your past. You draw from your past experiences. She draws from how she was raised, the values that was instilled in her as a young lady. Look, she is steady on her feet, still in her resolve. And tonight she should talk to the American people, sit in their living rooms, go to their kitchen table and say, look, I have some ideas that I want to share with you. There's so much that we have done together over the last 4 years, but here's what I think we can do together over the next 4 years. Be positive in her approach and really remind the American people that we don't want to go back to the chaos and the confusion, the disaster that made, of course, the American people go out in droves in 2020 to fire the former president. Say, I want to be a president that lead all Americans. I want to keep us strong and secure. And here's the plan that I want to share with you tonight.
And Donna, I of course meant Biden. She has to own up to the Biden administration's any mistakes they made too, and Donald Trump is going to go after her on that.
You know, Martha, they made mistakes. Donald Trump and Mr. Pence made mistakes. But you know what? If we focus on our mistakes, we won't focus on all of the good things that we could do together as Americans. I do believe there's something to say about people who are now able to work. The people who can buy their insulin without paying over $1,000, $35. There's so much good that she can talk about from the visits that she's made to small towns across this country, large cities across the country. Bring us together. The American people want to be led into the future, not dragged back to another era.
And Reince, I want your thoughts on, you've also prepped Donald Trump for debates back in 2016, I believe. What Donald Trump do you think we'll see tonight? Can he be disciplined about talking about policies and what kind of president he will be?
Well, he certainly can be. I mean, the reality is Donald Trump doesn't have a lot to lose tonight. I mean, his support has always been almost unmovable. So the second piece is the honeymoon, I think, is over for Kamala Harris. And you all kind of touched on it with Donna. Kamala Harris has to answer for the state of the economy that she took a role in the Biden administration, the border, you know, her past positions on decriminalizing the border, decriminalizing certain drugs, what her role was in Afghanistan. So really, the spotlight is on Kamala Harris tonight because she played a role in the Biden administration. She wants to act like she's not an incumbent. So this is where the focus is going to be. And she's got a lot to answer for tonight. And I think that's where Donald Trump's focus will be and where it actually should be tonight.
Well, one of the things he wants to do is have female voters look at him. How does he attract female voters after saying things about Kamala Harris? And we'll see how he pronounces that tonight. Things he said about Kamala Harris, that she's dumb as a rock. That's not really going to attract female voters, is it?
Yeah, no, it won't. But I also think that just like he did in the first debate against Joe Biden, I think the formula here is to constantly tie Kamala Harris to the Biden administration, which is where Trump is winning against her on the economy, inflation, and all these other problems that we're having, and then sit back and let her talk. Let her explain herself, her past positions, current positions. How does she feel about how Biden has done on the economy? How does she feel about the border? Well, then turn it over and let her talk.
Resort
Okay,
to
thanks so
insult.
much for joining us tonight, Donna and Reince. We're all staying tuned. Can't wait.
Yeah,
and I have to
your,
say, as we are
your
just a
sound
couple
got
less than
garbled
2
there.
minutes away, this such an extraordinary moment, and especially Rachel, when you consider that these two people that have been the center of our lives for the last 2 months have never met each other.
Have never even met each other. And Harris said, if you got something to say it to my face. The question tonight, does Donald Trump actually go there? He's questioned her racial identity. He's questioned her intelligence as well. Or does he stick to the issues?
Look, this is the largest audience they're likely going to have in this race. It will be interesting to see if Harris can make clear the stark choice before voters. And where does she decide to land her punches? She can punch hard. Can she do that while rising above the needling coming her way? But first and foremost, are we going to see a handshake when the two of them meet for the first time?
We didn't back in 2016 when I did that debate. We'll stand by to see that tonight. But the first time, side to side, together.
And I have my doubts that we're going to see that handshake, but what we are going to see is a spirited debate and perhaps the most consequential general election debate we have ever seen, because almost certainly going to be the last one. So with the stakes so high, the presidential debate just moments away, we have the entire news division keeping an eye on everything. We're going to be fact-checking on our live blog. It's all going to be happening right here. The debate now just 10 seconds away, and we will be back with our post-game show as soon as it's over. We are going to toss it right now to David Muir. And
All right, sweetheart, go ahead and mute that. Make sure
Tonight,
not
the
to
high-stakes
pause it. Check, say something and check. You might have to check your sound because you were garbled a moment ago. I'm not hearing you, dear. You're muted.
How about now? Can you hear me?
You're garbled.
Uh-oh.
You're doing this kind of thing.
Oh, no.
Yep, that's what's
What did
happening.
I do?
I don't know how to fix that because I don't know why it started. But it's still going. Yeah.
How about now?
Now it's better. Say something else.
Something else.
Very good. Okay, I guess we can put the volume back on. We should be good to go.
Here now, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Here now, another
Good evening. I'm
couple
David
of
Muir,
talking
and
heads.
thank you for joining us for tonight's ABC News presidential debate. We want to welcome viewers watching on ABC and around the world tonight. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump are just moments away from taking the stage in this unprecedented race for president.
And I'm Lindsay Davis. Tonight's meeting could be the most consequential event of their campaigns, with Election Day now less than 2 months away. For Vice President Kamala Harris, this is her first debate since President Biden withdrew from the race on July 21st. Of course, that decision followed his debate against President Donald Trump in June. Since then, this race has taken on an entirely new dynamic.
And that brings us to the rules of tonight's debate. 90 minutes with 2 commercial breaks. No topics or questions have been shared with the campaigns. The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer questions, and this is the clock. That's what they'll be seeing. 2 minutes for rebuttals and 1 minute for follow-ups, clarifications, or responses. Their microphones will only be turned on when it's their turn to speak. No pre-written notes allowed. There is no audience here tonight in this hall at the National Constitution Center. This is an intimate setting for 2 candidates who have never met.
President Trump won the coin toss. He chose to deliver the final closing statement of the evening. Vice President Harris selected the podium to the right.
So let's now welcome the candidates to the stage. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump.
Trump doesn't have an audience to play to. Kamala knows how to do these kind of things in a courtroom.
Kamala Harris. Let's have a good debate.
Have fun.
Thank you.
Welcome to you both. It's wonderful to have you. It's an honor to have you both here tonight.
Good evening. We are looking forward to a spirited and thoughtful debate.
So let's get started. I want to begin tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their number one issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid, and I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing, and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes
This is
for
the
their
kind of
children.
answer I would expect from Trump.
My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses.
Yep. And that
My
was an
plan
easy
is to
question,
give a
too.
$50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before. which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
This was such an easy
President
thing.
Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
If I'd answered
First
this,
of all, I
I'd
have
have
no
killed it.
sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation has, which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history.
The
We
lowest
were at
inflation rate
21%,
in the
but that's being
G7.
generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums.
More fear mongering,
and they're
and we
coming
got
in
a
and they're taking
3% inflation rate, which is
jobs
the
that
best
are
in the world
occupied
right now.
by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that she and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get
Okay,
them
here
out.
we
We have
go
to get
with
them out
this.
fast.
Yeah,
I created
that's
one of the
not- that's
greatest
not
economies
inflation.
in the
That
history
he went
of our
right to
country.
immigration and
I'll do
sparing
it
people.
again and even better.
He
We are
had the
gonna get to
greatest economy,
immigration and
except that
border
Clinton's
security
economy
during
was
this
better.
debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's
By
talk
the way,
about what
Kamala, are we
Donald
better
Trump
off now
left
than we were
us.
20 years ago? Or
Donald
4 years
Trump
ago?
left us the
I can buy
worst
toilet paper now.
unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there.
We all
I
know
haven't read
better.
it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of
practically
people that
wrote it.
got together. They came up with some ideas. I guess some good, some bad.
You
But
can't
it
read
makes no
them.
difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows
It's like
what I'm going to
30
do.
to
Cut
50 of
taxes
his
very
own
substantially
administration
and
wrote the
create a
thing.
great economy like I did before.
And they
We
credit
had the
him
greatest
for it.
economy. We got hit with a pandemic. And the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died.
Which
Has
Trump
there been anything
botched.
like it? We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a
Especially after
country
getting rid
where
of the
economy
pandemic
and where the
response
stock
team
market was
just
higher
before it
than
happened.
it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounce back, and it bounced back, and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So record low unemployment rate.
Donald Trump has no
Does
plan
it bounce
for you.
back?
And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
It's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going
Except for the one
to
who
bring
said
up
that Trump was
our
the
worth,
dumbest
our
student he
value
ever
as a
had.
country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
How can we take a
Mr.
look at her
President,
plan
I
if
do
she
want to drill
doesn't have
down on
one?
something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up
Run,
your
spot,
tariffs.
run.
You responded.
The last-
Let's drill down on
the
this
last
because
book you read.
your plan
There goes
is
your
what she
microphone
calls
again.
is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I
See, he
was
still
the only
thinks
president
that China
ever.
pays for the tariff.
China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else.
Trump's
the
inflation was at
people
a
of
low
our country are
2.4,
absolutely
and we
dying
are
with what
currently
they've
at
done.
3.
They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President
The
Harris,
Trump
I do wanna
economy was
ask for your
slowing
response.
down
You heard what
before the
president said
pandemic
there,
hit.
because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of
China
what that
paid Trump
requires,
more money
focusing
than
on
we did while he
relationships
was
with our
president. He
allies,
was working
focusing
for
on
them.
investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having on the short end of the stick in terms of workers' rights.
we're at
But what
972,
Donald
you're
Trump
correct.
did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point, when we know that she was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist.
I don't know
Her father's
that,
a
but
Marxist
she's not.
professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our
He
economy.
started out
They have
kind of
she
addressing what
has
she said,
destroyed
and then
our
he starts
country
the
with
insults and the
policy
scaremongering
that's
about
insane.
immigration again.
Almost policy that you'd say
Like you can't
they have
stay
to
on
hate our
topic.
country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, is doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years. They've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the
Executing
exceptions
babies at
for
9 months,
rape,
and Tim
incest,
Walz
and
is
life
terrible
of the
because that's what
mother.
he
I
said, and
believe
he didn't
strongly
say
in it.
it.
Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of
crazy.
Republicans do. Exceptions, very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great
But it
service.
will be if Trump is elected.
And
It
the
will be a
Supreme Court had
nationwide
great
ban.
courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else.
Project
and every
2025
legal
does
scholar
detail
wanted it
that
to
there
be
would
brought back into the
result
states,
in a
and the
nationwide
states are
ban.
voting. And it may take a
Don't
little
believe
time,
in
but for 52 years,
as
this
one
issue
thing and another.
has torn our country apart. And they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came
Well,
to
I
your
won't
desk?
have to because, again, two things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50 and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of? When they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then her, I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea and how unfair that would have been. Part of the reason they lost to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free, but they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D. And I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans.
She's
They
asking
taunted
if he
young
would
people
veto
and a lot
it.
of other
So
people
then
that had
if
loans.
you were president,
They
not
can never get
her.
this approved. So it
Oh,
doesn't matter what
yeah.
she says about going to Congress. So wonderful. Let's go to Congress, do it. But the fact is that for years, they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government. And we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, I want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working one or two jobs, who can barely afford childcare as it is have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers to go and get the health care she needs. Barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body, and that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
Excuse me, I
thank
have
you.
to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you answer
That's the problem.
question? Would you
because
veto?
under Roe v.
Answer
Wade,
the question. Would you veto?
you could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th
That's
month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the governor, former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said, we put the baby aside and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
No, that
We're gonna
never
turn now
happened.
To immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to
Somebody
Republicans,
fact-check
Democrats,
him.
voters across the board in this country. Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill, which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working
This is
there
a good
right now
point she's about to make.
overtime, trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress, and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first. And I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go,
Why
she's
are her
bussing
rallies
them in
bigger?
and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the
Yeah, and I'm
history of
sure your
politics.
hands are real
That's
big,
because
too.
people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again. She's destroying this country, and if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is
the people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
but
television.
But the people
I'm
on
taking it from
television
the city
saying their
manager.
dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice
We'll
President
find
Harris,
out.
I'll let you
What?
respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about
That doesn't make any
extreme.
sense. The hell?
You know, this is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election, I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a four-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond here.
Thank you, because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people. Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people who's were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper, he was no good, I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book, because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they? But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier. So let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S. military.
Police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country.
Is that why we have
This will be
a
one of the
record
greatest
of
mistakes
50-year
in
low
history
crime
for
rate
them
right
to
now?
allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in, and all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof, despite
Crime
the
here is
fraudulent
at a
statements that they made.
50-year
Crime
low.
in this country is through the roof, and we have a new form of crime.
Through
It's
the
called
floor,
migrant crime,
asshole.
and it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice
Excuse me,
President
the
Harris, I'll
FBI
give you
they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud, just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
Thank you, ABC. Some
Well, I
fact
think
checking,
this is
some
so rich.
moderation. Hey.
Coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing. And let's be clear where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important
So
in
Trump
this
is for
race. It
defund
is
the police?
important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm
failing
winning most
most
of them.
of them, but
But
he
those
keeps-
are
he
cases,
keeps
it's called
appealing.
weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made
He's the
them
one that
go after
appointed the
me. By the way,
Supreme
Joe
Court.
Biden
Who
was found
else, when they commit
essentially
crimes
guilty
like
on
that,
the documents
gets
case.
to
And what happened in
pick
my
their
documents
judges?
case? They said, oh, that's the
Uh-uh.
toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election.
President
They're
Trump-
fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies. Someone who has openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people
Vice
to
President
stop
Harris,
him.
thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president.
We gotta
This is the
continue
one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy
President
with a fake
Trump.
Russia investigation
We do have a lot to
that
get.
went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to
And
ban
and
fracking.
Russia was
Now
still
you don't.
implicated
You wanted
in the
mandatory
Mueller
government
report
buyback
and
programs
still
for
is
assault
being
weapons. Now your
implemented
campaign
now,
says you don't.
or
You supported
implicated
decriminalizing border
now.
crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every one of at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on longstanding work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your
Well, first of
response?
all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now, if you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar? She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis, she went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish, one thing so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over,
Under the Biden
they got rid of it,
administration,
started
we are
getting rid of it,
producing
and the
more
prices
oil
were
than
going
we
up
ever have.
the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead. Fossil fuel will be dead. We'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take 400,
President Trump.
500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that we
for the
have to get
environment,
to.
as
We're
she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar. Remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, "Oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet." That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America? They're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world. And crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just
when
ask
are those, David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle? They went into Seattle. They took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask
You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to
January
Nancy
6th,
Pelosi and the
idiot,
mayor
when
of
you were
Washington,
supposed to stop the
D.C.,
violence.
and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi, but I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the president of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say?
He said
there were
that
fine
nobody
people
on
on
the other
each
side
side.
got killed. Just
Let's
ask
remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia,
the police officer.
the president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say, we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath
We're
was.
producing more energy now than any other country ever has.
Debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this, you talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The president of the United States, you'll get him out of bed. You'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You'll say, come on down to the office. Let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say that.
sarcastically.
But
You know
those-
that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have
Trump's
sent
now
it
lying
back to the
about lying.
legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls, and we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm,
I don't
lost
know
by
if
a
you
whisker.
can
We
hear
didn't quite
me,
make it.
or
And we
if I'm
should just point
chopping
out
up.
here as
You're
clarification,
sounding
you know
better
this,
now.
you and your allies,
Illegal
60 cases
immigrants,
in front of many judges.
whatever,
many of them
Judge
are
looked at
undocumented
it
and said
non-citizens
there's no
we didn't have
widespread fraud.
standing.
cannot
That's
vote.
the other thing. They said
God,
we didn't
how
have
many people
standing, a
repeat that?
technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The president of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose the election.
No, he doesn't believe that.
was
He's
won
still
by
lying
President
about
Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask
Did
you
he
about
just call
something
him
that's
Mr.
come up in the last
President?
couple of
Thank you.
days. This was a post
He's not
from
the president.
President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as vice president of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did in fact lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart, Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago, it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president, but when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the
They
first one
didn't
to
throw him
leave
out.
because
You
she
can't
failed.
force a
And
president
now
to
she's
run
running.
if
I
they don't
understand
want
it,
to.
but I'm
When
okay with
LBJ
it
did
because
it.
Your time is
Decided
up.
we're going to
to
do
not
very
run.
well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now
Yes.
to
It's
the
just-
Israel-Hamas war and the
He wishes he
hostages
was
who are
with
still being
debating
held,
Biden right now.
Americans among them.
Poor
Yep.
Vice
baby.
President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis, many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters, because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror. And they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris, he says you hate Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself. It is well known that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un. And it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear. They can manipulate you with flattery and favors. And that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on
Vice
national
President
security,
Harris.
including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it, that's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down.
More
Putin endorsed her
brown
last
people
week,
fear-mongering.
said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And
Because of
Biden,
the
by the way,
Sioux
is
Nation
paying a lot
being
of
having
money.
Thank
their
you. We
water
have a lot of
supplies
issues to
poisoned.
get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
Yep. Lalandra and I were at the Keystone Pipeline. We were at the protest there at Standing Rock. The reason that Biden wanted to shut that down was because it, as predicted, failed and dumped tens of thousands of barrels of oil into the only water supply for the Sioux Nation, as was already predicted would happen. Obama shut it down, even though he was invested in it, and Hillary was invested in it too. Had she won, she would have stood by that decision. But Trump was invested in it as well. And so when he won, he started it up again. And he also he put in provisions so that the Standing Rock Nation could not any longer legally protest construction of a commercial venture, because that's what Trump wanted to do.
Hi, someone is saying, is this Arn's daughter? I'm his wife. When I'm not that young, I'm 53 and he's 61. So it's not like this May, December thing. But anyways, that often comes up. But let's talk about what we just heard during this one of the two commercial debates. What I can't get over with is just the outrageous lying. And why his supporters want to believe that. The biggest one he kept repeating is the millions of illegal immigrants doing all kinds of awful things, including making people in Ohio eat cats and dogs.
Yeah.
Like, why?
He got that from some one person on TV said something. So Trump says, you look at what's going on in Ohio, and we're just supposed to know that one person on a TV show that Trump saw said something like that was unverified. That's what he's talking about.
I know. That's the point, though. It's still an outrageous lie because he acts like many people are doing it.
Yep.
Because
we don't even know that the one
protocols.
person is doing it. It's just some anecdote that Trump saw that he was never verified, and it may not even have been a thing that he saw. He always says, "You look at what's going on in Chicago right now. It's so pathetic." How do we look at what's going on? Because we have no idea what Trump is talking about. Trump doesn't know what he's talking about. He just tells us to go look at different places.
Somebody else was saying the transgender operations for illegals in prisons thing too.
Yeah.
What? Just what? That's what I've been thinking this entire time. And why do people buy these things? I mean, it seems outrageous to a lot of us, but we watch Trumpers. This stuff comes from his mouth, and they just repeat it without even thinking about it.
Yep. And it's amazing to me that Trump gets away when they call him on it, even when the fact checkers are only able to say that there's no state that allows, babies to be executed after they're born. There's no correction. You're never going to get Trump to say, "Oh, I was wrong about that. Here, let me stop telling that lie."
And I appreciate ABC for calling him out on the lie about Ohio. This is the first time I've seen moderators fact check him. There may have been one before, but I've seen all of his debates, and nobody ever fact checks him.
You look at Ohio. You look at what's going on in Ohio. I went back to Ohio, but my city was gone. There's no train station. There's no down. I'm sorry.
And somebody is saying in the comments about the post-abortion thing.
Yeah.
That too. They just keep repeating that. And we've seen people in real life say that infanticide is a thing.
Yeah, and I know what that's based on. And ironically, Trump doesn't know what that's based on. Someone was talking about conjoined twins, where as these newborns were growing, one of them was going to become so parasitic that it was going to kill both of them, and one of them could not live on its own. So they were talking about they had to have the right to be able to separate the two so that the one could live, because they're both going to die otherwise. All right, let's put the volume back up.
Here we go.
Into this conflict. Mr. President, it has been the position of the Biden administration that we must defend Ukraine from Russia, from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their democracy, that it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being people being killed by the millions. It's the millions.
He
It's
wants
so
the
much
war to
worse
stop as long as
than
his
the numbers
boyfriend
that you're
Putin
getting, which
wins.
are fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion or more. because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left. I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's. Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they
here,
threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
your time is up. Just to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interests for Ukraine to win this war? Yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal.
He's
because we
avoiding
have
the
to
question
stop
again.
all
He
of
wants
these
Russia
human
to win.
lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour. I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier, and I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow much happier than he is right now. But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening, but he does have that. Something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. And that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strongmen instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is commander-in-chief. And the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I wanted to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen. He's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you.
President
Otherwise,
Trump.
we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected world leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not again appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be commander in chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So if you take a look at that period of time,
Take
the
a look
Taliban
at
was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, you know, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, it was we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal, and in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those
remember
were
when
your
he tried
words,
to
so
take
I don't
over a
I don't know.
casino
I mean,
on a
all I can
reservation?
say is I read where she
Because
was
the owners didn't
not
look like
black.
Indians to him.
that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I think it's, I mean, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. You know,
And he
I do believe that
constantly
the
did it
vast
tonight
majority
with
of
all the
us
brown
know that
people
we have so much more in
tear-gassing.
common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to Black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young Black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first Black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your third time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said. Going
Like
back
scary
many,
brown
many
people
years,
coming over
a
the
lot
border?
of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park Five. They admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so
lowest
bad.
inflation rate in
that
the
she
world
can't
right
get away
now,
with that.
Thank you. Your time is up.
I want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly.
which is a fraction of
Clearly,
a point above,
I am not Joe
above Trump's
Biden.
inflation, by the way.
And I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country. One who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers.
Sounds
That's
like
the
she just
kind of
mentioned 3
conversation I
plans.
believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name calling. Let's turn the page
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President
Let's
Trump,
turn back
we
to
have
policy.
to move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy,
She
please.
has a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she
we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move
to
on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay. Thank
That's
you, Mr.
what her
President.
plan is until just recently.
I just need
Lindsay,
to
go ahead.
respond
President
because
Trump,
the
President
former
Trump.
president has
No,
said
I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to
No,
respond to.
I'm sorry. We're
I
gonna
just need to
move on,
respond
Vice
one
President
time
Harris.
to what he has
President
said
Trump, this
multiple
is
times.
now your
Yes.
third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it. And
So
we're going to
Trump
replace it.
has
But
no plan.
Remember this. I
Kamala
inherited
just mentioned
Obamacare
3,
because Democrats
explain 3.
wouldn't
He doesn't
change it.
have
They
one.
wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up. They wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be? Never going to be great. Or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad
ones
ones. We
that
had some
aren't in
real
prison
bad
yet?
ones too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money
So like
and
I
be
said,
better
Trump has
healthcare
no
than
plan.
Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just
9
so you know, you
years.
still do not have a
He
plan.
hasn't come up
I
with
have
a plan
concepts
yet.
of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not too distant future.
Vice President Harris, in
that's what I predicted he
2017,
would
you
say.
supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run healthcare system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private healthcare options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being, you don't like him, you said at the time, because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president and we over the last 4 years have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it.
Vice
Pass as
President
prologue
Harris, thank
in terms
you.
of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a
She
lot
made a
of
mistake. At number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money.
Then why
But
haven't
she
you?
won't improve
You had
private
9
insurance
years.
for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to get.
President
People
Trump-
are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said that climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
Why was Trump earning
We'll be right back with
away
closing
from
statements
Russia
from both
while
of
he
our
was
candidates.
president?
An historic night, this ABC News presidential debate from Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
I'm so irritated at this. I mean, Trump, everything Trump says about China, he made money off of China. He made more money off of China than he did off the U.S. He was working for China. He also made more money off of Russia and off of Saudi Arabia than he made from being president. So he was taking huge cash bribes. What was the country that was somebody recently? He's going to be up on charges again for taking a massive bribe where somebody gave him 250 pounds of $100 bills. Was it Egypt? Somebody was giving him a massive bribe in terms of, you know, like just bags and bags of liquid cash, literally. Honey, do you have anything to say?
I don't remember. It's been quite a debate.
Oh, there goes your mic again.
Oh, let me try and fix that in a second. Is better now?
Yeah.
It's been quite a debate. But I empathize with everybody who's been watching. Like, for me, I want to believe in the decency of America and Americans, and that we're still neck and neck in this race with this guy, and none of them can see that he's a blatant liar. Either they can't see it or they don't care.
I'm really mystified because I've never understood how you can listen to Trump for 5 minutes and not realize that he's incompetent. He has no idea what he's talking about, and he's lying.
That's what has made me so happy about, like, I wasn't Biden's biggest fan, and Trump keeps bringing it up because he wishes he was debating him. But at least he was decent enough to set himself aside so that America could have something better, because he didn't want Trump to become president. And like what I see with Harris and Waltz is hope. It isn't like the same old bitching about other Americans and migrants rather than solving the problem. pointing the finger, scapegoating other Americans and migrants rather than solving the problem, giving yourself and your rich buddies tax cuts rather than solving the problem.
Yep. And every time he goes off about, dangerous people coming in over our southern border, I'm just so sick of it. But they really need to call him out on this. All of his strongest arguments are baseless. There's no truth to any of the shit that he says. Why don't they stop him from saying it? Why don't they stop every time he says, well, you look at what happens in Ohio. What when you say look at what's happening in Ohio, what do you mean, sir? Because I bet you he won't say. He doesn't know. He's just pointing out at random whatever.
And they uncritically repeat it. Someone who obviously doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yep. And he's using those as a deflection. I guess he thinks that everybody watches the same stupid news story that he does.
There is a real element of division and hatred in America for a lot of people. But even I grew up in the South, in Spring, Texas, and people there was this negative stereotyping of other Americans and immigrants and migrants, sure, and but there were still these decent people, and that this many millions of people can fall for this blatant bullshit. And why we're even having this conversation.
Yep. And I'm looking at some of the comments in the chats, things like the accusations of people eating cats. This is Trump's go-to argument now. Let's turn the volume back up. We're back on.
Here we go.
But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years
Yeah,
to
3.5 years to fix
create
border
jobs
until
and all
Trump
the things
torpedoed
we
it.
talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like We're not going to frack. We're not going to take fossil fuel. We're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching here in the U.S. and all over the world, and from all of us here at ABC News. Good night.
All right, honey, let's mute that real quick. Let's just make one final comment while I look over the chat. I want to hear what is your summary. I'm gonna read the final comments that I see going through this chat. And what do you say about all this, dear?
Well, that was certainly a better debate than the Biden-Trump debate, and I think Trump was off topic most of the time. A lot of times incoherent, lying.
Yep.
Fear-mongering, but he was still a little more alert than he was during the Biden-Trump debate.
My issue was that when all of his facts are fundamentally false, the worst economy ever is not even. It is higher. Our inflation rate is higher than Trump's lowest. Trump's lowest was, I think it was 2.4, right? And he so at one point he was at 2.7, and we're at 3 right now, which means that we had the best economic recovery of any nation in the world after the global inflation rise of the pandemic, right? It was a global pandemic. Thanks, Biden. Except that everybody had the problem, but it was not Biden's fault. It's not even Trump's fault, although he did botch the pandemic response. He actually eliminated our pandemic response team just before we needed them. But I mean, how can Trump say that we have numbers like nobody's ever seen before in their inflation rate? No, we did have a high inflation rate, and then they brought it back down almost to within it's a fraction of a point away from where Trump's was.
One of the comments from Keith Wingate is, I can't wait to hear his last comments regurgitated at me by my parents, who are only going to have that clipped and spammed at them by Fox and people on Facebook. Yay.
Yeah.
This is exactly what I'm talking about. They don't even, how do they even know anything? Like, how do they know if what Trump is saying is true or not? They just trust him. Like, they always think that we worship Biden or we worship Harris or anybody. We don't. We fact check them too.
Yeah, whereas Trump supporters literally do worship Trump. But as I said, my biggest problem is just that all of his arguing points are lies. There's nobody that's doing post-birth abortions. There's nobody that's sanctioning like 9-month abortions. I mean, there are situations where where the woman could be killed even in a 9-month abortion. That if the woman's life is in danger, that kind of thing. I mean but that's not what he's talking about. So all of Trump's core arguments are based on falsehoods, and nobody calls him out on that. And his assertions about how we have the worst economy when we have the best economy in the world, right? When he says he had the best economy in American history, but his economy was never as good as Clinton's, and his economy was already slowing down before the pandemic hit, which was his mistake, right? So I don't know. I try to get hard numbers out of Trump supporters, and I just can't. I have one guy criticizing me, complaining. Do you really think Biden is praiseworthy? Well, does Biden deserve the praise for what his administration actually accomplished? And here's the list of things. Oh, so you want me to worship Biden? No, I don't want you to worship Biden. Nobody worships Biden. But if he did this thing and this thing was good, give him credit for the good thing that he did. And in the meantime, show me something Donald Trump did that was good, and I'll praise him for it. And they can't. So all they can do is project. Now, I will say that Trump's inflation rate pre-COVID wasn't bad. That's it. That's the one good thing I could say about him.
I did appreciate the moderators finally fact checking him a little in real time, and so quickly too. But they did kind of let him get the last word in.
Yeah, and
Harris back on for him.
Harris could have performed a hell of a lot better, given the question that the opening question, the first question. Are we better off now than we were 4 years ago? I could spend 30 minutes talking about how much better off we are now than we were 4 years ago. Yes, prices are higher, and that's why there are dozens of lawsuits from mostly being done by the states themselves. So it's the individual states, for the most part, that are suing price gouging companies, because while the prices remain stupidly high, and the corporations are making record profits because they don't have any means, because nothing is to force them to lower their prices. And that's what these lawsuits are all about. But you can't blame that on whoever's president.
I wasn't going to look at the after debate commentary, but there's Tim Walz right there. Let's see what he says.
Okay, let's do it.
Just a second.
Matters. So I think the whole country can see what happened tonight. We'll keep pushing forward. That's the way that the country wants to see our politics be. She laid it out clearly. Donald Trump brought nothing tonight. Anger, resentment.
Governor Walz, I do want to ask you, she did not answer questions on abortion restrictions. She never really answered that question. Can you clear that up, where the Harris-Walz ticket stands on that?
Certainly, and you couldn't get any different than this. The reinstitution of Roe versus Wade, what was the law of the land for 52 years. You saw this in there, and him pushing back to the states. She's exactly right. It's people like Amanda in Texas, which everybody saw on the stage in Chicago, nearly bleeding out, having sepsis twice because she can't get the care. She's been absolutely clear on this. Everything Donald Trump said, that is untrue. The clarity of this is Roe. When you have Roe, you have the protections in place where women make their own decisions with their healthcare providers, not Donald Trump.
Okay, thanks so very much for joining us, Governor Walz. John?
And we have the other side of the ticket. We have Senator J.D. Vance.
Oh, J.D. Vance, here we go.
Running mate joining us now. Senator Vance, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Sean. Appreciate it.
I like to drink beer.
I want to get to one part in the debate where you came up. Donald Trump was asked if he would veto a national abortion ban. He didn't answer the question, suggested, I guess, that he wouldn't. And then it was pointed out that you, in fact, said not that long ago that he would veto a national abortion ban. Can you explain the mix-up here?
Well, I think the president's been very clear that he doesn't want a national abortion ban. I think in some ways he finds the question a little bit ridiculous, because why are we asking him about legislation that's never going to actually happen, and why he would veto it or not veto it when he says very explicitly that he doesn't support a national abortion ban and he wants these policies to be made by the states. But I think there's a deeper and more important issue here in this debate, which is that you had Kamala Harris effectively echoing platitude after platitude after platitude. The American people can't pay their grocery bills on platitudes. They can't put their kids in a house on platitudes. And Kamala Harris had a lot to say, but very little actual substance behind it for how she's going to lower grocery prices, secure the border, and make housing more affordable in this country. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She can't run on a record, and she apparently can't run on much of her plans either, because it's just a lot of slogans and not a whole lot of substance.
But Senator Vance, why won't he just say that he would veto the national abortion ban? And by the way, had you spoken to him about it before you were put in a position to answer that question?
No, I hadn't spoken to him about it because, again, Donald Trump thinks the question is absurd because he doesn't support a national abortion ban, and he's been explicit about it. And, John, I think that it's so preposterous for the media to focus so much on an issue where Donald Trump has been crystal clear and not on the fact that people can't afford groceries and housing because of Kamala Harris's policies. This election is actually quite simple, and Kamala Harris and apparently the media would like to distract Americans on issues, by the way, that Donald Trump's been crystal clear about, but they're not talking nearly enough. This debate didn't talk nearly enough about the fact that Americans are struggling because they can't afford groceries, they can't afford housing, and a lot of their kids are dying of fentanyl overdoses because Kamala Harris has let the Mexican drug cartels.
Excuse me, that was Donald Trump's fault.
What's going on in our country, John, and we could do so much better if we just had better leadership. We've got the best workers, the most beautiful country, the best natural resources, but Kamala Harris's leadership is squandering the great benefits of this country. It's why we've got to get back to Donald Trump's leadership.
Okay. Senator, by the way, I asked because he hadn't been crystal clear and he said something different than what you said. That's why I was seeking clarification. But let me ask you about this for just very quickly. I heard Donald Trump before this debate describe Kamala Harris as, I'll just read a few of them, a low IQ individual, somebody who doesn't have the mental capacity to be president, really dumb, unable to put two sentences together. Is that what you saw on the stage tonight?
John, what I saw was a lot of slogans. I think the American people are smart, and Kamala Harris talks to them like they're children. She repeats these ridiculous platitudes where if you actually think about what she said, you realize that it doesn't make any sense. She talks a lot about her plans, but then her plans, when you analyze the substance, don't make any sense. And more importantly, John, the American people don't get fed on plans. She has been the vice president for 3.5 years. What she can't do, refuses to do, and has no ability to do is to say, I accomplished lower prices because she didn't, or I accomplished lower housing prices because she didn't, or I secured the southern border because she didn't do that.
Because Trump fucked that up.
The question is, do we want to give her a promotion? I think the answer has to be no, John.
All right, Senator Vance.
Trump is the one who torpedoed the border
Both sides can agree on
bill.
This was a consequential night in this race. More reaction when we come back. Stay.
All right, I think we've had our reactions. It's disturbing to me that they don't actually look at the real numbers. You know, JD Vance just said that the reason people can't afford things is because of Kamala's policies. But there's not a policy he could name that has anything to do with why prices are so high. That's why she was complaining that all these lawsuits have to be done against the price gouging companies. And that's why the prices are still so high, because the corporations would not drop them after the pandemic. They managed to, the Biden administration managed to get the inflation rate down, but that won't drop the prices until the price gouging
He
stops.
does have a plan to create a commission, a federal commission on price gouging.
Yep.
And Trump calls that price controls, but she's not controlling prices. She's just going after companies like food companies that are price gouging.
And then you're going to have the Republicans just lie about what she said, what he said, and what they heard that wasn't what we heard.
Did you hear the dodge from both Vance and Trump? Because neither of them can come right out and say that there is going to be a national abortion ban under a Trump presidency. Both of them keep saying it will never get through Congress. It's a non-issue.
Yep.
Okay, but just like Roe v. Wade was struck down by the Supreme Court, any state, any crusading state like Texas can take their abortion bans to the Supreme Court or challenge states that have abortions, and they can strike it down nationally.
Yep. And that is the plan. So when Trump says that he wouldn't sign it, he doesn't have to. The plan is already in place. Project 2025 set the plan in place where that will happen automatically without Trump having to sign anything.
Is this mic better? And I love how he tried to dodge.
This mic is better. You were terribly like this all the way through up until right now. So
sorry about that.
Yeah.
Anyways, did you hear how he tried to dodge Project 2025 in the beginning?
Yep. And we all know better. We all know that this is a lie. The president of Project 2025 said publicly on video that this is all Trump and that Trump should get all the credit.
And JD Vance wrote the forward to Project 2025.
Yep. So it doesn't matter. They're just that's what our political situation is. The Republicans are just going to lie. Now, I'm not going to mince words. I am disappointed that Kamala, I think, did relatively poorly tonight. They were giving her questions that I know the answers to. I could have slammed. Now she didn't. She did know more things than I do. She answered some things that I could not. I want to be fair. But it was disappointing to me, like with the first question, how easily she could have gotten off on the right foot in that debate by answering the question directly and with specific examples.
I don't think she did relatively poorly.
What she did, I'm not saying relatively compared to Trump, but compared to what I was expecting, yes.
No, I do agree with you that she should have been more on message about and answering the question about how it's better now than it was 4 years ago. And she could have focused on the things that were better now and listed them. That would have been better than the answer she gave. But she did challenge Trump on his lying. And she just didn't sit there and flat-footed like Biden would have and let him lie and lie and lie. So I'm not going to say she did relatively poorly in general.
Yeah. The only thing that she really called him out on when she said that her and Tim Walz are both gun owners, they're not trying to take your guns away. But Trump made comments like that that were just as baseless, just as wrong all the way through this debate. And Kamala managed to get that one dig in to correct him. But whenever somebody corrected Trump, whether it was her or whether it was ABC or any, there's no acknowledgement from Trump. There's never going to be, well, I'll stop saying that then. No, he's going to continue saying that because he's often said, just keep telling the lie and they'll believe it.
Yeah, it's true. And I just don't like a kind of a total generalizing statement like relatively poorly because it's quote mineable.
You're right. That's not what I meant to say. She didn't do as well as I expected her to do. At least not in the beginning. And there was some things where JD Vance was talking about platitudes. Yeah, she's making campaign speeches. And I'm not the arbiter. I'm not a metric on this. But I did not appreciate hearing the campaign speeches in the debate. I thought that there should have been a different tactic, a more blunt, brutal, full frontal response, clear and unambiguous.
Because you said that there's people in the comments opening it up like she lied about the border, about abortion. She lied about none of those things.
I never heard her say anything that was a lie, and I don't think I heard Trump say anything that was the truth.
So, no.
Yeah. So I'm going to bail. I have been up way too long.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't. So 2 days without sleep, and I'm going to have to get out of here.
We
Thanks.
got up at 3 a.m. to drive to Austin to testify. Texas is trying to promote Christianity to elementary schoolers in the curriculum. At least the State Board of Education is trying to approve this kind of curriculum. And then he drove all the way back here same day so that he could do this. He could do this debate.
And that's after going to bed at about midnight because I tried to go to bed earlier, but real life has things happen that you have to address and take care of and do, and so I don't make it to bed. And I can't actually get to sleep until about midnight
And
to get up at 3 a.m.
And remember this too, that we live in Texas and a lot of people live in red states. And the one thing that keeps protecting us from the tyranny of that in the past kept us safe almost from the tyranny of the majority, it was the Supreme Court. And now that's gone. So like if Texas wants to proselytize to elementary school students, and we take that to the court and people say that's not constitutional, and yes, it's not, to promote one religion over another.
I
But
will say
if
this.
the Supreme Court is deciding this, we get no help. There's no recourse for us.
Yeah, I will say this: the public turnout was admirable at testimonies at in Austin today. There were a handful of activist groups who were well-funded, extreme right-wing, billionaire-funded organizations who were out there trying to promote integrating and infusing the Bible lessons, including full-on biblical literalism to six-year-old children in first grade. But there was an awful lot of the public. The majority of the public was against it, and this included an awful lot of Christians. I met James Tellerico, who is a Christian in this state, but he advocates for secularism. I met another guy Reverend Dr. Jonathan Davis, who is with Christians Against Christian Nationalists. So I'm expecting to do an interview with him soon. There was a Bible scholar and Christian theologian who recognized me and came up to. He's one of the stars of the show. But he gave testimony years ago at the same venue where I did. Both of us promoting secularism over fundamentalism. And he came up and introduced himself today, and we shook hands and everything. And I'm definitely going to have a video of him on my channel because he said some wonderful things today. So I was encouraged by that. And I wouldn't say that the Board of Education in Texas is quite as extreme as they were 10 years ago. Definitely not. There were people on the board who had savvy and understanding and were able to correct a lot of it. There was like witnesses, for example, who thought that In God We Trust was always on our money. No, that was in the 1950s when they changed it from E Pluribus Unum to In God We Trust. Because E Pluribus Unum is too woke now.
Yeah, a lie. What do they say? A lie can travel 100 times around the world before the truth puts its shoes on.
Puts its pants on, yeah.
Puts its pants on. He will be making videos. I think he interviewed some of the people he mentioned, and he will post them to the channel. And also, he'll be posting his testimony and some of the other testimony, right?
Yeah, I'm going to be putting up an edited version of the testimony. There's going to be I'm going to include a link so that you can see the full everything. But that was you're talking about a video that would be in excess of 6 hours, 7 hours, I think. But I'm gonna do a slightly shortened version, and I'm gonna probably do two different versions of it. Because there was some other nice things in the. There was the right-wing extreme conservatives did a press conference, and the Texas Freedom Network also did there was the Texas Values, I think it was, or the conservative group did a press conference, and Texas Freedom Network did a press conference, and both of them had speakers, and that's all good stuff that I want to have access to and show you the audience. But I'm going to have to go.
I have one last thing. We talked about how Trumpers will just repeat what he said in the debate tonight, whether it's true or not, or how often he lies or whatever.
Yep.
One thing I'm seeing in the comments is a little bit of, I don't know if they're real people or just trolling. I'm an atheist for Trump. I mean, and you're commenting this while Arn is talking about how religious conservatives, your beloved Republicans,
yep,
are trying to indoctrinate children, elementary school children in our schools with Christianity.
Yep.
So there is no such thing as maybe you can vote for Trump and you can vote for Republicans, and secularism is not a priority to you. You just don't believe in God.
Yeah.
But don't expect us to clap you on the back for it.
Yeah. And I think you're right, dear. I think that's just trolling. But anyway, thank you everyone who's been on for this. It was a bucket of chuckles. I couldn't even read the chat that was going by so fast, so I apologize for that. Tried to stay on top of it as best I could. But now I'm going to go crash. Good night, Gnu's. Have a pleasant tomorrow. Hasta la bye-bye.
Bye.